Uni, good to see you again. Commander George Overton, Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, PSOJ. Thank you. That's a hairless man. And from the JBDC, Althea, what's this, Miss Myers? West Myers, sorry. West Myers, not East Myers, right? West Myers. Business Advisor Services Manager, she'll be representing, replacing Mrs. Vera. And Professor Rosalie Hamilton, thank you very much. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Pinnock. Now, this afternoon session, I'm going to ask each panelist to just give a brief 5 or 10 minute presentation. And then after that, we'll open the session to questions and answers. Now, the panelists we have here represent different sectors. We have Yoni representing the BPO. You know, we have Rosalie. Who do you represent, Rosalie? We have Alta representing the MSME sector and Commander representing the private sector. Now, as I mentioned, all of these play an important part as we roll out this Logistics Hub initiative. So you're hearing the different perspectives as they come forward. The first speaker is Mr. Yoni Epstein. And Yoni, without further ado, please.
That's even easier. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished guests up here with me, good afternoon. So as you would have heard, my name is Yanni Epstein, and I'm the chairman of the Business Process Outsourcing Association of Jamaica, which was launched in September of 2012, really to focus on the growth and development of the BPO ICT sector here in Jamaica, as well as from a growth and development from an advocacy perspective with our sector. You know, we currently have a sector with just over 14,000 employees working in it, generating turnover of about 300 million US per annum, with the majority of that held with Xerox as the largest player in Jamaica. Next, Teleperformance, and then there are some local players, one of them myself, as well as a couple other international operators that are working here, much alike of Sutherland Global, who have been the benefit of the UE partnership, as well as Hinduja Global. As you would have seen in the paper this morning, the Observer, Hinduja Global is growing to some extent, as well as a player who's a large call center based out of Philadelphia, bringing 500 seats to the Barnett Tech Park in Montego Bay, and they should be starting in December. So all in all, when you look at the sector on a whole, there is tremendous growth. There's rapid growth. As a whole, as a sector, it's been here in Jamaica since the late 90s, early 2000s, and what kind of slowly replaced the 807 factories of the 80s with a much different business model, clearly. And between 2000 and 2007, we saw tremendous success, and we had a bit of stagnant growth between 2007 and 2011, and we've started to see a tremendous uptick again with new jobs and new companies coming into the sector, both local players and international investors coming to the fore. When you look at even our company and some of the trends that are taking place in the global economy for outsourcing, I mean, we are about to, between now and February, March of 2015, grow our business by 100% again, just based off of new contracts that we're bringing to the table here in Jamaica. And much of the companies in the sector are seeing similar growth. Obviously, the larger ones that are 6,000 seats are not seeing as much growth, but still hundreds and hundreds of jobs are being brought to the table by them. Given the fact mainly that, when we go to marketing events in the U.S., the companies that are outsourcing currently to India and to the Philippines, which India we know is the technology kings of the outsourcing sector, and Philippines the front office call center of the industry. But the big advantage that Jamaica has over the rest of them, and why we've been able to be successful thus far, is our cultural affinity to North America, as well as to the UK, our proximity to the United States. Generally 3 to 4 hour flight from anywhere in the Midwest to the Northeast of the US to here. And in some senses, ease of doing business. We have the technological advancements here in Jamaica in the sector, which plays a big role for these businesses, because the mere fact that we can have redundancy, and now as I saw Jason Corrigan earlier, this Digicel has joined the mix with providing fiber services. We now have 3 players, which really makes us more competitive with regards to the BPO sector, as well as you go on a larger scale into the global logistics hub. So when you look at some of the things that have hindered us, and we're talking about security more specifically, I mean it's not something that you can hide. I mean, it's been in the papers for the last few years. It's been more quiet recently. Scamming has been a tremendous deterrent to our business, and companies have had to spend a lot of money to up their ante in regards to security and protecting of data. As well as we had to work with the government to change the framework of the legislation, which I think that is the most significant change in the whole scheme of the sector and securing the sector, given the fact that an individual can actually be prosecuted now, and there has been some successful prosecutions since this has been put in about March of 2013, and I think security on a whole is a huge part of our country's development and on a macro level of business development. So I think when you look at the sector and you look at globally what is happening, if we can continue to produce good English-speaking human capital that has an understanding of the sector, where I'm confident we can do, not only because of what our countrymen and women are doing currently in the sector, but we as an association drafted an MOU with HEART to revamp the curriculum and continue to train and output new individuals into the sector. Security, as I said, is a huge part. What we've found after and longer term of the whole issue with the scamming is that individuals, any one of us in this room, can go online and buy a list for marketing purposes. I think 100% of us in this room would be using it for good business practices to generate business for our companies, whereas these individuals have found ways to purchase lead lists online, and it's finding ways to cut that down. But I think the legislation is a massive deterrent, and it is certainly working. So it's to keep the security in line. Infrastructure, continuing to build space. You hear in some instances realtors say it's bad business to build space for the call center industry. I've never heard of a call center leaving Jamaica. I've never heard of a company leaving a call center in Jamaica. So to me, I mean, I could be biased, but I think it's quite the opposite. It is good business. You look at the car jarrets that have built space at their Barnet Tech Park. They filled the first 50,000 and looking to build more. When you look at the partnership with UE and Sutherland Global, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of UE or Sutherland, but I think from what I've heard, it's been a successful partnership thus far. You have abilities where students can join the workforce while they're in school. There's nothing better than that. When you look at technology, I don't even think I need to go into that. We clearly cover that, and I think we actually do cover it better than most of the countries in the region and some countries globally. And our business competitiveness continues to get better and better. And as long as I sit on a steering committee with Dr. Deans, and as long as we can develop the special economic zone that will supersede the Free Zone Act, that we're remaining competitive with the global marketplace, I think that that video that you showed at some point will continue to become life and reality. I certainly can say from a BPO sector, we as operators, we as an association, our relationship with the government. I mean, I say it, and I think, I mean, again, I could be biased, but you know, people complain that they're not getting the support in their respective industries. I can't say anything bad about the support that we have gotten from the government of Jamaica thus far in helping us to propel and continue to drive this sector forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoni. As you heard, the BPO sector is growing by leaps and bounds. You also heard Yoni mention that our three major telecom providers are putting in place significant amount of infrastructure to support not just the BPO sector, but all businesses in Jamaica. But you probably would also have heard that recently their fiber cable was chopped by some unscrupulous persons, and many people had their phones down for quite a while. So you see, protection of this infrastructure is also critical. Yoni also mentioned about the threat of scamming to the BPO sector. So when we talk about the logistics hub, it's not just about moving passengers and cargo. It's also about moving data. And as we roll out the logistics hub, we have to think about how do we secure that data? How do we deal with the issues of cybercrime? And when we get to the question and answer period, I hope we can, sort of discuss that aspect a little. I now invite Commander George Overton from the PSOJ to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Private Sector Organization of Jamaica has welcomed the opportunity of the Global Logistics Hub to the shores of Jamaica. But Jamaica, in our history, have never been lacking opportunities, nor have we ever failed to grab hold of the opportunities that come our way. What we have probably done in the past is fail to embrace those opportunities in a sustainable way. And it is hoped this time around that the Global Logistics Hub, we will grasp it in a wholesome way and ensure that what we do is sustainable throughout. That for sure is going to rest on how we establish ourselves as the Global Logistics Hub. The dialogue, as we heard Dr. Fritz say earlier, that it's the chain. Nobody has direct ownership, but it's the chain that's going to drive us to where we need to go. But certainly that chain must have some direction, some guidance, and every link in it must know the role that it's going to play. Certainly the PSOJ sees the opportunities that exist. They exist on the ports itself, the trucking opportunities, the warehousing opportunities, the security opportunities, the value-added opportunities that will come with the logistics hub. But certainly as we go forward, we must have things clearly understood by the stakeholders. If we look at our historical past, we have been able to attract the 807 garment industry here. As Yanni indicated earlier, we were able to bring the call centers here in its early stages of world development. It petered out and it has now come back because maybe we have been given a second chance to fix those ills of the past. I don't think the logistics hub today is going to give us a second chance. You know, looking around the room earlier, I said, you know, there are a couple stakeholders that are missing from this forum. I haven't seen the Ministry of Works and Transportation. I haven't seen the Ministry of Health. And more so, I haven't seen the trade unions, because those elements are potential deal breakers as we go forward if we don't have a clear understanding of what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're agreeing to. We were able to attract a lot of the 807 garment factories here in the 80s and 90s. We sold ourselves as a cheap labor market. The truth is we are not a cheap labor market. There are added things to employment that we're silent on. and those became deal breakers along with the security issues. Those security issues still exist today. Cargo contamination, shipment contamination, vessel contamination are still realities. And as we go into the global market, it becomes a two-way street, because not only do we have to worry about what is coming in, we need to worry about what is also going out of our countries. So the whole security issue, which we spoke about earlier today, is real. On the labor market, there is no two ways about it. We have a very able, capable labor market here, English speaking, easy to train. However, it's a very demanding labor force. We need to get the buy-in of the trade unions to ensure that we understand what is a fair labor rate, so that when we enter the negotiations and we are able to seal the deal, so to speak, there are no surprises coming from the woodwork later on down the road, that we have all of those things ironed out clearly before us. That is very, very important. Welcoming the jobs, the economy needs it. Believe me, I don't think we could go another decade with the level of growth that we have experienced. And therefore, we hope that with the global logistics hub and our ability to seal the deal as the fourth node, we will get that stimulation that we need. We will get the jobs that give people the opportunity and hope, and pretty much turn around the fortunes of the country going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commander Overton. You raised some very good points. You spoke about sustainable development. Let me just spend a minute dealing with that. As Fritz mentioned, I lecture at the Caribbean Maritime Institute on sustainable supply chains. And when we speak of sustainability, it has three sides to it: economic, social, and environmental. And you have to balance the three in order to get sustainable development. And we're ensuring in our planning, in our rollout of the logistics hub, that we do practice sustainable development. Regarding the many opportunities that are in front of us and our past experience with the free zones and the 807 experiment, some of you may have been part of the SEZ policy forum we had 2 weeks ago, in which we had wide stakeholder consultations on the new special economic zone policy, which is to replace the free zone policy. Now, many of the lessons we learned from that free zone experience, we are making sure that we don't suffer any from those past experiences. And some of the lessons we learned was, it's not about going after the lowest level jobs, the lowest level type of industries. That's one lesson we learned. Jamaica has too many talented and skilled people for us to settle with that. The new model we're practicing is going after more highly skilled, more value added, more intellectual, innovation-based industries. The failure that we had with the 807 experiment was that we just focus on one segment of that industry, the sewing together of the garments. The DOMREP started the same experiment, but their 807, their garment is thriving. Why? Because they went the full vertical integration of the entire sector. So they not only sew the fabrics, they make buttons, they make zippers, they design the fabrics, so they have a thriving industry. They have an industrial cluster. And as a result, that is one way of making it economically sustainable. In terms of the integration of the other ministries in the process, I mean, a project of this size cannot be done with just one ministry, and so there's total integration of all the ministries. I now invite Althea West-Myers to give us a few opening remarks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon I want to add some flavor, some value to the already vibrant discussion by asking two timely questions and underscoring two strong points. Firstly, I want to bring into sharp focus the question of what is the global marketplace demanding of MSMEs in developing countries. I want us to examine briefly but closely the current state of the Jamaican MSME sector. And in the context of the broader discussion, we will consider the potential impact of the sector and its activities on national security. And finally, I ask the question, how do we fix it? So, what is the global marketplace demanding of MSMEs in developing countries? Current assessments indicate that the rate at which countries grow is substantially determined by, among other things, their ability to integrate with the global economy through trade and investment. Steady technological and structural changes on the international stage over the past decade have made it easier for MSMEs to participate in the global economy. Indeed, growing evidence suggests that high growth potential SMEs require early access to international markets to ensure their development and growth. But while it is true that globalization has facilitated increased international business contacts in recent years, evidence suggests that relative to the contribution that they have made in the domestic markets, MSMEs are still underrepresented in the global economy. For example, in most countries, whether in developed or developing nations, MSMEs typically constitute about 95% of market penetration and may contribute up to 50% of direct value-added production. They contribute about 50% of GDP generally and 60% of employment to their national economies. According to the OECD, however, most evidence suggests that they contribute less than 30% of exports and even less to international investment. Disaggregated, the percentages vary by firm size, so the smaller the enterprise, the less likely it is to pursue international strategies. By region, in Europe, for example, the average contribution is just over 20%. By business type, in some territories like the US, internationalization of business services exceeds that of the manufacturing industry. So then, in an environment where there is reduction to barriers to trade, with multinational corps continuing to seek to globalize their supply chains, in an era of low domestic demand, and at a time when brand Jamaica is on everybody's lips, are our local MSMEs ready for the big stage? What are international markets demanding of our MSMEs? The competitive global marketplace is demanding that MSMEs rethink their business models, their products, and their go-to-market strategies. They must upgrade. They must make better products or make the same products more efficiently. They must move into new sectors, and they must move into more skilled activities. In other words, MSMEs must become innovative and differentiate in order to adapt to the realities of the global competition. We talk about creating a culture of entrepreneurship, but in reality, the international marketplace is demanding that we create a culture of innovation. Human factors play an important role as well. MSMEs must learn to harness talent and culture as an imperative. The value of partnerships is important. MSMEs must realize that the big fish eat the small fish any day and every day. Supply chains, value chains, clusters are essential to gaining a foothold in new markets. And MSMEs must learn to value cooperation as a competitive strategy. Now, what does the Jamaican MSME landscape in particular look like? So we spoke about the realities to which MSMEs must adapt in order to be able to access and operate efficiently on the big stage. And we said they must rethink their business models. They must develop a culture of innovation. They must understand the role and value of technology. They must become a part of the global supply chains. And of course, the pertinent question becomes, relative to the demands of the international markets, are Jamaican MSMEs, generally speaking, at a place where they can step onto the big stage and in so doing advance the interests of national security? In order to answer this question, let us take a brief but detailed look at the profile of the Jamaican MSME sector. 2 recent studies conducted by the JBDC within the last 12 months indicate the following. Disaggregated, approximately 85% of the Jamaican MSME sector is micro businesses. That's 1 to 5 employees earning less than $10 million annually. In fact, a full 85% earn revenues less than 5 million Jamaican dollars annually. The PIOJ tells us that in 2013, Statin reported that sole traders accounted for 36.2% of employed labor force among MSMEs. Approximately 50% of the enterprises operate within the informal sector, and only about 47% of our enterprises are opportunity-driven. Therefore, most of them are necessity-driven. Persons do it because they have to, they don't have a choice. More than 70% do not regard technology. I've heard a lot of talk about technology and how it's here, but in our MSME sector, more than 70% do not regard technology as integral to their current business, process, or future growth. And the most popular form of technology used currently is a mobile phone. That's about 81% of persons use only a mobile phone. Only 10% currently export, and in most cases it's to one external market, and 69% do not regard entering the international marketplace as important to their growth. The ratio of male to female engagement in entrepreneurship is approximately 50-50 at the micro level, but the female entrepreneurship decreases as firm size increase. Now, what's the relevance of that? International activities increase with firm size, and we have heard much talk about the importance of female entrepreneurship to poverty reduction. So it becomes an anomaly if our rate of female engagement in entrepreneurship decreases as the firm size is increased. That's something for us to consider. But it creates a good segue for us into our next point. What is the relevance or the issue? Or does it link into national security? Obviously, there are gaps that must be filled, but what bearing does all of this have on issues of national security? How does my highlighting the reality of the size of the gaps that must be filled help in the current discourse? Let's start with the obvious. Economic growth, or the lack thereof, impacts social security and ultimately national security. Our ability to rev the engine of economic growth, which worldwide we regard as the MSME sector, that ability is significantly compromised as the engine requires some amount of overhauling. Issues of national security are often issues of socioeconomic well-being. We speak of creating a culture of entrepreneurship, and Jamaica is a country that is predisposed to entrepreneurship, albeit in various forms. Hustler, the self-employed, the man who just wants to eat a food, and the man or woman who sees an opportunity and painstakingly pursues it until his dream is realized. The Global Entrepreneurship Monitor continues to cite Jamaica as one of the more entrepreneurial nations of the world. But if truth be told, at the MSME level, as a nation, we have made entrepreneurship little more than a social safety net. But real economic growth is predicated on our ability to effectively penetrate global markets, to create a sustainable export strategy, to develop opportunities across sectors and across government agencies, and in order to realize economic and social and national security. So how do we fix it? That's my final question. We have to make the links. We have to connect the dots. We have to link MSMEs into supply chains and into value chains, ultimately into export markets, which will create economic growth, social security, and national security. We need to fill the gaps. We need to identify high growth potential businesses, handhold these businesses through development, find them funding. In order to fill the global market gaps, we need to integrate technology, redo their business models with the international marketplace in mind. We need to utilize the joined-up government approach and problem solve. So what are the issues of national security that our MSMEs face, and how can these be addressed by the Ministry of National Security? That's one question that we asked. And what are the issues of international trade that can be addressed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Trade Board or whomever? We have to utilize a joined-up government approach. We need to find ways to engender a culture of innovation. We speak of a culture of entrepreneurship, but we are way beyond that. We need to find new markets, new technologies, new products, new processes, new business models, new ways of thinking. Duplication is our current modus operandi. Monkey see, monkey do, me too, me too. The innovative worth of our businesses in the MSME sector is extremely low. As well, we need to shift the paradigm as it relates to treatment at the policy and operational levels. Very basic, we need to distinguish between opportunity-driven and necessity-driven enterprises. We need to recognize that our own account holders and sole traders cannot, of themselves, drive growth. We need to recognize that their value is to add incremental employment, but we need growth we need to harness high growth economies and business in major ways. I trust, ladies and gentlemen, that I have ruffled enough feathers to create this space.
Well, thank you, Althea. Those were some fascinating statistics. It reminds me of, when you travel in Europe and the US, there's these HSB signs, and they say there's a sign that speaks about even micro firms will be multinationals. We have to see how we can capture this 85% of the MSME sector, which are micro firms, and making them into multinationals. But you provided a very good segue to our next speaker, Professor Hamilton, and I invite Rosalie to speak to us.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Althea, for laying the foundation for perhaps the most dynamic sector in the economy. Flaws and all, I think the huge potential for growth lies in this sector for creativity. And so I thought I would look at it from the perspective of what the national security policy currently says. It clearly recognizes that national security issues are important to achieving economic objectives and helping us to ensure that we can effectively compete in a global marketplace. There are two issues I thought I would raise very quickly. One is the recognition of entrepreneurs as vital economic assets. Now, the policy highlights the growing evidence of extortion and its costs for businesses and ultimately just, trying to do business in Jamaica. And it points to the fact that it's an important deterrent. And while that's important, I think it and other crimes significantly cripples small businesses and limits their capacity to compete globally. If you think about it, when a sole proprietor or a small business owner is murdered, the business dies. And repeatedly we see this kind of impact on the small business sector through crime. Now, while I want to commend the ministry for the Ministry of Industry, that is, for the significant work that it has done to push Jamaica in a different place with respect to the Global Competitiveness Report, and so we're looking good. It's important to note that the last report has crime and theft as the #1 most problematic factor for doing business in Jamaica, and corruption is #3. So that the problems are real, businesses face it, and so I wanted to search the policy to see, how is the policy addressing these issues with respect to businesses in general and certainly small businesses in particular. The policy correctly recognizes the need to contribute to a stable economic environment and sets out to do so in Goal 7. And this is to provide the environment for a stable economy and effective delivery of social services. And among the capabilities that it sets out to develop and strengthen is an effective security apparatus that is able to protect and sustain the vital economic assets on which the economy depends. And the objective is very clearly stated as to strengthen security around vital economic assets. So while I agree with the ministry's commitment to enhance the visible land, air, sea security systems in key resort areas for the protection of the tourism sector, I know Camille is there and is glad to see that, I searched the policy to see an equivalent commitment to protect the vital economic assets that we have in the form of the entrepreneurs, especially in the MSME sector. And I saw no equivalent commitment. So I want to urge the Ministry of National Security to view entrepreneurs, especially those in the MSME sector, as among Jamaica's most vital economic assets. And we have to protect it as such. Too often I hear businesses, the cries as basically, whether it's security forces or so on, treating businesses as criminals without asking too many questions, or perhaps not just getting a fair shake at the system of justice. And so there's a sense in which I think more perhaps can be and should be done. The policy, however, also correctly recognizes that protection of the most vulnerable and the alleviation of poverty are important objectives that the government must pursue for a stable and secure environment. I submit that entrepreneurs, especially those in the MSME sector, are among the most vulnerable in this society and are on the forefront of alleviating poverty. And there's lots of data to substantiate that. So let me applaud the ministry, however. I'm not here to bash the effort. I think it's a good policy. I want to applaud the Ministry of National Security for its attempt to expand community training programs in business development, the startup business, micro businesses, and so on, in the effort to reduce poverty and to expand employment opportunities, and to suggest that one wants to look at how you could strengthen the policy to more directly and explicitly recognize the entrepreneurs, especially those in the MSME sector, as important assets to protect. The second quick point that I want to make is the importance of the policy in addressing cyber crimes. And I was very pleased to see that the policy very explicitly addresses cyber crimes and plans to deal with, and I'm quoting here, international criminal actors. And certainly that's the reality. There are lots of criminals functioning and using the internet in a very negative way. I certainly applaud those efforts, and of course I'm not here to, I don't have the skills really to assess the adequacy of those provisions in the policy with respect to cybercrimes. But I do want to say that it's important that we pay a lot of attention to this. Our capacity as a country, certainly for small businesses, to effectively penetrate global markets in this rapidly changing environment where we've heard the limited use of technologies among many small firms, means that this awesome mechanism we have called the internet must be protected. And we have to minimize, if not eliminate, the criminality that we see too often being perpetuated through the internet. I want to suggest to the Ministry of National Security that you include online entrepreneurship training in your community training in business development. It's an area that I think we have to spend much more time. I certainly am encouraging my colleagues at the university to do much more on online internet entrepreneurship. And very importantly, and lastly, the preservation of access to free educational resources online. And I think perhaps not enough of us recognize that there is a lot of educational tools and information that's available online and are available freely from the best institutions in the world. The Harvards and MITs and so on have put a lot of programs on the line. You can access them freely, and is now providing certificates when you do these programs. So it is important that we protect this mechanism for us to penetrate global markets, and I think that we need to do more in ensuring that our populace, certainly the businesses, are better trained in how these tools that exist online can facilitate and enable us to effectively penetrate global markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hamilton. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to the part where you can really question our panelists. Bearing in mind the topic of this session is getting in shape for the big stage, preparing for the global market. Are we ready in terms of being prepared for the global market? And I'll probably throw out the first question to Yoni. Are we doing enough to prevent the scamming that is affecting your sector? Are we doing enough to curb cybercrime in many of the data infrastructure that we need, you know, the port community system, the ASICUDA, the single trade window? Are we doing enough?
With regards to scamming, I think we need to look and take the approach of a national approach and not necessarily specific to the BPO sector. You know, as I said before, scamming is as easy as, I mean, we all know it that I've been a part of it, as easy as getting contact to a lead list that can be purchased online by any human being. I think what has been done in more recent times has certainly helped. The fact that the lottery scam legislation, or the proceeds, I can't recall what it is right now, but the lottery scam legislation has caused for the JCF to actually prosecute in court, and I think that was the hindrance before. They could arrest, but no prosecutions were not happening, given the laws that were at state at that time. So I think that is a significant win for the country on a whole. I think the players in the industry, and I think when I say take a national approach, I mean data can be taken from as small as a company of 2 employees to any of the largest companies on the island. So I think a national approach is certainly something that we need to take from a lottery scam perspective, because let's face it, lottery scam is not only stuff of activities being taken abroad. I know many people locally that have been called and told that they've won something as well. So we very much have it apparent in our local things here. So I think that's a great first step. Taking it on a national approach is a great first step. And I think doing more things to create deterrent. I'm not a security man, but you know, I think a lot of things, and I hear my father who works in the security industry at times, creating deterrents are some of the biggest benefits to stopping infractions. So, you know, in the free zone, we fingerprint every single employee, you know, before they even get a pass to the free zone entrance gate. And I think that right there, doing a fingerprint and then a background check to find out who you're dealing with. You know, there's ways around. If you've not been prosecuted, clearly you're not going to come up inside of the system. However, it's a huge deterrent to somebody that thinks they may have been in trouble at some point, that they're not going to be able to get a job in the sector. They're not going to even bother trying to get a job in the sector. And working with the Minister of National Security and the previous Commissioner of Police, they actually made life a lot easier, because when you have, like in the Montego Bay Free Zone, there's 7,500 employees. So to try and get 7,500 employees fingerprinted and background checks done was, you know, it was a huge burden. They'd have to go to the police station. They actually spent the entire day there. They have set up a facility where they come down and spend 3 days a week now, every month of the year, in the free zone, and we, you know, do a canvas of the areas to who needs to get background checks done, and then we send them through, and for 3 days they just knock it out, which has been a tremendous success for us as an industry. So I think creating a national awareness of it and what other businesses can do is would be a great success for us. As far as to the ports and stuff, I can't really speak to what takes place in those networking infrastructures, but I can tell you from a call center perspective, I mean, our network infrastructure is as large as any globalized company. I mean, things can always happen, as we've seen, Home Depot's credit cards system was, and I was actually one of those people. I went to Home Depot about 2 weeks before, and then I got a call from Scotiabank to say we're sending you a new credit card because it was compromised. But our systems are pretty tight, and they're locked down to where employees can't even get into a website unless that website is specific to the client that they're working on. So I think greater awareness to IT professionals on the island, I think, will help to lower and lessen the abilities people may have online for cyber scamming and cyber crimes as well.
Okay, thank you, Yoni. I want to open the floor to questions. Please raise your hand and identify yourself prior to asking your question.
We are with the logistics. Question I say, Dr. Dean. We are with the logistics over this time. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I have a clear picture as to where we are with the logistics hub.
Which aspect of it? We only have 5 minutes, so.
No, in general, because I've been hearing about this logistics hub, but I'm not seeing a picture as to where we are going and where we are.
Okay, let me just give you a quick snapshot as to what the logistics hub is, because some people think it's just this a port facility or airport facility. The Logistics Hub initiative is about attracting global businesses to base their operations in Jamaica to serve a global market, right? So that involves us creating the supporting infrastructure, which is the ports and airports and internal logistics. But it also involves creating the business environment, which is conducive. So you heard the minister speaking a lot this morning about the advances that we have made in terms of the business environment. So where we are with the logistics hub is that we're making tremendous progress in all aspects. There are many components involved in the logistics hub, and we're making tremendous progress in that. That's the short answer, but afterwards I can spend more time on going into more details for you. Well, let me throw out a question. Professor Hamilton mentioned that entrepreneurs are some of the most vulnerable, and it wasn't well represented in the security policy. What do we need to do to protect entrepreneurs as opposed to, the rest of the society?
Question, and I thought about that as well. I looked at this when I came, and I saw a lot of numbers and stuff. I think perhaps some number that perhaps businesses could call if they're in trouble and, they're kind of on the edge. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe some of these existing numbers could help. But I think the concern and the experience I've had with many businesses is that when they report crimes or when they try to get issues addressed, they're either not taken seriously or there's some kind of presumption of guilt, and that those perhaps can be addressed through training and a deeper understanding of what it takes to run a business and why when I've heard horror stories, I have to tell you, among taxi drivers. So when the vehicle is seized, it's tied up for days, weeks, whatever, and that person can no longer earn an income because the one asset they have is seized. Now, there are lots of issues there. They're not all innocent, but they're all not guilty either. And I've heard, many, many stories. So I think a lot has to do with just how you interface with businesses, recognizing the challenges that they face. Right now, for example, this is the worst time for any of these criminal activities to face small businesses in the face of Chick-V, and businesses are virtually on the edge because workers are just not turning up to work. And the impact for many of these businesses is unbelievable because, some of them are just struggling to stay open because, especially if the main entrepreneur is ill. And so, how you deal with these businesses as they report crimes or as they try to get issues resolved is very important. Timeliness, perhaps, is the most important way you can help, by just handling these matters quickly. So you don't have to spend 4 hours in the police station just to report crime, for example.
Thank you. Well, I'm getting the wrap-up signal, and I just want to thank Mr. Yoni Epstein, Chairman of the Business Process Outsourcing Association, Commander George Overton from the Private Sector Organization, Althea West Myers, Manager of Business Advisory Services at JBDC, and Professor Rosalie Hamilton, Scotiabank Chair, Entrepreneurship and Development, Vice President, Development and Community Services at the UTEC. Ladies and gentlemen, give them a warm round of contributions. And I hand over to the session chair, Dr. Pinnock.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now at the end of this session. And let me just go back and just some observations. Well, based on the presentations early after lunch and the strategy presented here, I must say I see a great link between the two, because the strategy is broad and it is flexible. Even the use of the matrix, the points that have been pulled out to say, okay, these are the things that are likely to happen now. Let's address them. And these things change, so the policy made allowance for that, as opposed to just giving a prescription, which is what we normally see in most policies, prescribing a fixed state of time, and then you have an event and things change and the policy become outdated. I must say that I'd like to commend again the Ministry of National Security and the architects for this document. And even the comments that were made and the questions, you can see as things change, the policy allow for the flexibility, in the environment. As changes takes place in the environment, you'll find the conditions will, and you can use the matrix in such a fashion. So I must make mention of that again. And a lot was said about the MSME, and in fact, we have a challenge. Because, in fact, Prof, you may help me with this, but a lot of times we use the word entrepreneurs. We confuse business owners with entrepreneurs. And the two are significantly different. Because a lot of traders define themselves as entrepreneurs. So, we have to now see a distinction. And entrepreneurs will now embrace this global, project. And will now see new opportunities in the so-called changing environment and the challenges, and now go for it. And this is what we need to foster and engender among our people. And just want to thank everyone, and thanks again to Dr. Deans, who already thanked the panel, and thanks to our minister who had to run off. Ladies and gentlemen, can you put your hands together again? Well spent afternoon. Sorry we didn't have more time. Now I'll turn over to Ms. Gwyneth Davidson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Pinnock. On behalf of the team, it is my pleasure to have been asked to deliver the vote of thanks